Hello, it's Thomas and welcome to Modern Anglo, quite literally as I prepare for Halloween that's coming up recently with this peculiar costume that I've managed to sprung into existence. I mean, honestly, I literally just use Halloween as another excuse to promote more patriotism and nationalism and more of my political beliefs at the end of the day. So yeah, honestly, hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to understand why I choose to make this character a part of my personal brand. When you saw the title of this video, you probably had one of two reactions. The first being, oh, what the hell is he on about, being a 19-year-old nationalist? Who does he bloomin' think he is? You know, young people these days, like, they don't know anything. Like, I need to check out this video, see what's bloomin' radicalised him. Bloomin' cheeky git. Or the second being, oh wow, a 19-year-old nationalist, British nationalist, English nationalist. Well, that's interesting. I really want to see what this guy's got to say. This is great to see. Regardless of which perspective you're closest to thinking to, whatever preconceived notions, assumptions, predictions that you have on me right now, I can bet you thousands of pounds, all my life savings, that I will not live up to them. Why? Because this is going to be a really long video. Like, I'm probably going to film this on different days just so I can get my bearings straight. Like, there's going to be a lot of content in here that you will probably find at least one thing, maybe a few things that you agree on, and a few things that you're going to disagree on. However, believe it or not, I'm not actually here to change your mind. I'm not here to tell you that I'm right. I'm not here to bring facts and statistics into everything, all that malarkey, like I even could anyway. I have only one aim, one little aim, and if I succeed with this, I'll be really happy, because it's such like a simple thing, but for some reason in this world that we live in, it seems to be really difficult. So if I can succeed with this, I'll be happy. And that aim is to successfully convey to you why I think the way that I do. I want you to understand why my life experiences have caused me to resonate with this specific niche of right-wing politics. And fundamentally, I just want to show you that I'm completely conscious on my beliefs. You know, like the paradigm that I've built up, I mean, it'd be great. It'd be amazing if I got it right first try in the politics section. It'd be right if everything that I believe right now, I was going to believe for the rest of my life. But chances are, that's probably not going to happen. Like, remember, I'm 19. You know, what do I know? Like Socrates, Greek philosopher, he said something about, you know, I only know one thing, and that is I know nothing. Like, chances are, I'm going to have at least 50 more years left on this planet, fingers crossed. And through those 50 years, I'm going to go through a lot of life events, experiences, like I've done in the past, where my belief system's going to be challenged. So that's just me being honest with you. Even if you've already been subscribed to this channel for a while, or you know me in real life, or you've just seen a bit of my content before, like, I just want you to make this an absolute clean slate and pretend that this is the first impression you have on me. Like, I'm going to probably make this my channel trailer too, because I really want this to be the best opportunity that people get of me, of my authentic self, because this video is going to be very anecdotal, very personal. Like, I'll probably get quite vulnerable at times, but the reason that I'm trying to, you know, portray this version of myself to you is I just want to be as honest as possible with everyone that comes across my content. So yeah, with that being said, what are we actually going to talk about in this potentially very long video? Well, first, I'm going to talk a lot about my childhood, like those early years, those the building blocks, foundations that really kind of like made my paradigm what it is. And then we're going to talk about like my later upbringing, like when I got to my teen years and I started being more like conscious about the world and actually getting into like political pipelines and that. Then we're going to be talking about the Bible and how that relates to nationalism, because I've recently been getting into the Christian faith, and you know, some people seem to think that, you know, you're hypocritical if you're following the Christian faith and also, you know, putting the people of your country first. So we're going to really dive deep into that and see what is the truth behind that. And then we're going to talk about genealogy, imperialism, because it's very specific to obviously Britain. And then we're going to talk about tourism, which should be a really interesting one, because I think it's going to be the thing that really makes me kind of stand out in terms of my opinions on how I got into nationalism. So yeah, stick around for that. Let's get into it. And just to clear any mishaps up, when I use the words England, Britain, and UK, I might just use it interchangeably without realizing. Obviously, I know how to differentiate between England, Britain, and UK. I think if you're going to be a nationalist, you need to know. So yeah, I'll probably just use it. Just don't mind whatever I say. You know what I'm referring to, right? And then obviously, when I refer to nationalism, I'm specifically referring to ethno-nationalism. And obviously, ethno-nationalism is the belief that your identity within the country is based on your heritage, ancestral heritage, you know, sharing the same culture and language as well, and religion as well, you could say. Whereas civic nationalism is a lot more broader. It's all your Tommy Robinson rhetoric about, as long as you assert to the values of the country, as long as you were born here, as long as you pay taxes, then you're just as British as the next person whose ancestry goes back thousands of blooming years, you know? So yeah, let's get into it finally. Okay, so I think the first thing I'd like to just establish, just to give you like a fundamental notion on how I came to be and the sort of upbringing that I immersed with, it's just to kind of bring awareness to how grateful I am, or how grateful I should be, on the very privileged upbringing that my parents gave me. And this just came to my head now. Like, I really don't want to have to quote Cecil Rhodes here, but he said something like, if you're an Englishman, you have consequently won first prize in the lottery of life. Now, I hate to say it, but like, it's kind of, is it true? Is it not? Like, obviously there's other countries that are just as good as England, but obviously I wasn't born in Syria, I wasn't born in Nigeria, I wasn't born in India, where you see all these problems and wars and terrible famines and, just poverty happening all the time. Like, I'll be honest, like, I'm very indebted to my parents and, to the sort of luck that I had. Like, I've just stopped to think now, actually. Like, I should be thanking my parents so much more. Like, I had such a happy, comfortable, nostalgic childhood. Loads of memories, loads of amazing memories, which I'm obviously going to get into. Like, it's just that like classic English working class 2010s upbringing. Like, it's working class England, and even then it's like, you don't, when you like compare it to a world scale, like I've just said, like you cannot compare the suffering. Like, I'm not saying that I like never face any dilemmas or challenges or anything like that, but like, getting picked on at school, or having a few financial troubles now and then, which means that you've got to go to holiday to like Butlins and Skegness and not abroad to Spain this year or something like that. Like, these are sort of average problems that the average Englishman's facing, and all those like problems that I had years ago, like they're not worries to me anymore. Like, I'm just free from it in that respect, and I'm not in poverty. I'm not starving. I'm not having to work 16 hours a day to feed a family of 5. Like it's true. Like, there's less than 1% chance of being born in England, and I'm in that minus 1%. It's crazy. So why was my childhood so good then? Let's actually get specific now. So I was born in 2006 in the city of Lincoln. As you can see, I've got the Lincolnshire flag behind me. Very nice flag, by the way. And Lincoln is probably the best city in England as well. It's probably why I'm so biased to say that, I had such a best upbringing I could possibly have. I just realised as well how blooming boiling it is to wear a tie inside, so I think I'm just going to take this off for now. So anyways, I lived on the edge of the city in Lincoln for the majority of my life with my family. Like in those like modern suburban red brick housing estates, like the ones that get like copy and pasted all over the country. Like, actually, you know what? Google it if you can be bothered, because I really want you to get like a good idea of what I mean by cushioned, privileged upbringing that I had. It's a place called Witham St Hughes. I'll put like some text on the screen now so you can go and have a look. It was just so safe. Like, the community was so tight knit. There'd be like loads of like young families settling there because they built like a school basically like in the center of like the village, the estate, so everyone like went to that school, knew each other. Like, there was loads of like green areas to go out, play football, ride your bikes all the way until like dusk. And like, there'd be like loads of events on all the time. Like at the village hall, you'd have like, your summer fair, your Christmas lights, your bonfire night, like Halloween, It was so good, like so many good memories, man. Furthermore, if you've researched like where Witham is and what it actually looks like, you'll notice that a lot of these like type of like red brick newly built housing estates that you see like everywhere basically have like dead end roads to like increase security. So it was basically like you go in, one way out. They want like big lorries and trucks like it was on the main road passing through all the time, so obviously that would make it more kid friendly. And most of the village was actually built in 2006, so obviously when my parents had me as a baby, like they moved there, and it wasn't like they were already going to like an established community village that had been around for hundreds of years, generation after generation. Like this was like a new community that they would like easily fitted into, because there was loads of like young families, you know, young kids there as well. Now, I think you can probably guess where I'm going with this, right? Like, yeah, let's just be honest. Why was this community that I lived in, why was it so tight-knit? Why was it so safe? Why was it, I guess, just so good? Like, why did I have all these great memories? Because I was amongst people like myself, white people, overwhelmingly so, or more specifically, native English British people. Like, that is all I've ever known for my entire life. Like the village itself, like I'd say like 98% white at a push, 95% white British, native British. And yes, when you compare that to like the whole city of Lincoln, you've got like areas like Ermine, you've got areas like Sinsel where there's like all those like council estates and the quality of life is a lot worse, there's a lot more poverty. But still, when you actually like put everything into an average, like it was pretty much the same across the board. So why is it really important that I actually mention this? Because for a start, I think a lot of people seem to forget that this sort of like idea of like multiculturalism is, you know, our strength, like diversity is our strength. Like I cannot relate to that. I do not live in London, Birmingham, Manchester, all these cities which are becoming, you know, demographically different these days. I just don't relate to it. I don't think a lot of people can relate to the fact that this nation was built on immigrants. Which immigrants? You mean like the Anglo-Saxons that came over 1500 years ago? The odd Viking, the odd Norman? Do you know what I mean? Like this is the thing that really gets me. I mean, bear in mind, I'm talking about how life was 10 years ago. Like a lot has changed since then, and we know that. Like, just imagine what like the farmers in the countryside that go into the city maybe once, twice, 3 times a year. Imagine what they think of the jargon of, you know, diversity is our strength. They probably don't see it and believe it as much as I do. Now, that doesn't mean I never saw like immigrants ever. Like, yes, there was a few. Like when you'd go NHS, like sometimes you might get like an Indian doctor. Like when you'd go Chinese takeaway, like, you know, you'd most likely be getting served by someone that's Chinese. You know, you go to the car wash, like most often or not, it'd be like a Polish guy or a Romanian guy. And, you know, you kind of just saw it differently back then. You kind of just had this understanding that, oh, you know, these guys, they've travelled from a long way with their expertise, whatever job role they're coming to do. And you kind of like have respect for them in a way. You were like, oh yeah, this guy's like washing my car or washing our car. Like, big up. Like, there's this idea that, oh, if you live in this like racially homogenous society, that like you've just got racism inbuilt and like immigrants coming into the area aren't safe. Like, no, like, for a start, we were very much built on Christian values as a society, and two, like you just couldn't how could you like justify like being racially discriminated to the guy from Poland who's like washing your car? Like it just be stupid and so illogical. But regardless, like, yes, there was immigrants, but it never really truly altered like the core identity of the area. Like, let me give you an example. So when I went primary school, right, there was like 30 kids in my year group. And I'll try and keep this like confidential as possible, because obviously I'm going to be speaking about people in real life, so bear with me. So our class of 30, there was 2 kids. They were from like the same family as well. They were mixed race, so like half non-European, half like native British. And then I think there was maybe like 5, maybe 6 other people that had like some like partial heritage like somewhere else in Europe, like Germany, Portugal, Poland. Like there would always be like one kid like, oh, my granddad's from Poland, or, you know, I'm half Portuguese, you know. So I'd say what's that, like 1 in every 4 people had like a partial immigrant background. And regardless, we still all united on this premise that we were, you know, ethnically related. And then when I went to secondary school, obviously that's a bigger place. There's like a bigger catchment area, people coming from afar. And that was like the very first time when I was like 11, 12, where I was like actually seeing and speaking to people that were of like full Indian or full African heritage, for example. And even then, that was like so rare. It made up like 1% of the school. So growing up, I think I kind of had this belief of like, most people here are British and native like me, but sometimes, someone from another country might want to join our team. Like, that was as far as it went. That was all with good heart. Back to those like Christian values, which stuff like, love thy neighbor, everyone's morally equal under God and should be treated as such, and, love and forgive each other. In fact, it wasn't just the teachings and the demographics that were like quintessentially British and English. Like, I remember we used to go to school and we used to celebrate St. George's Day. Like, we used to come in wearing like red and white, bringing the flag in. Like, we'd learn about him, slaying the dragon. We'd like go at lunchtime to eat scones and Victoria sponge. Like, there was never ever this rhetoric about the flag being racist or, oh, we need to decolonize the curriculum. Like, no one cared. It was so relaxed. Football was like the pinnacle of life for me and all my mates. Like, I remember in primary school, like, if it had been like raining the night before, like the dinner lady at lunchtime would have to like check the field to see if it's like dry enough to everyone go on the field and play football. Like, we used to have like, I guess, like little rivalries that we'd all support like different Premier League teams or like non-league teams, and used to swap like match attacks. We'd go to like the ball court after school to play football. Like, oh, it was just great. Like, even when like Lincoln City went on that FA Cup run in 2017, I think it was, and like the whole city was just buzzing because we beat like Burnley, and we nearly beat Arsenal at that FA Cup quarter-finals. Like, oh mate, it was just amazing. Even the school dinners, believe it or not, were like quintessentially British. Like, I'm not saying we never had like pizza on a Friday or like lasagna every now and then, but I remember it was literally like jacket potato with beans. You'd have like Lincolnshire sausage and mash, toad in the hall, like roast dinner with like Yorkshire pudding, cottage pie. You'd have, like, what else was it called? Like jam sponge pudding with custard. We even celebrated like loads of like local traditions and festivals. Like, I remember we did like a school play on Robin Hood, because obviously like Sherwood Forest was like very nearby. It was like the local folklore of the area. We used to like, I think it was like days where we like dressed up as like Beatrix Potter characters. We like came in and did like a World War II sleepover, which was like really unique. We used to go on like all these educational trips to like castles, cathedrals, like old halls and other like historical sites, which I think in a way, like, I hope this makes sense to you, but I think it like subconsciously made us more connected, like as a group, as an ethnic group, and just made us even more connected just to our actual like heritage and culture ourselves, without realizing it. Now, obviously, that's just a few things that I can kind of just get out of my head, but you might be sitting there thinking like, Thomas, those things that you mentioned, like, yes, they're English and British, but they're not, exclusively English and British. Like, other cultures, play football as well, and they learn about World War II and stuff like that. And yes, my point is that I believe that culture stems from ethnicity and race. And I think if the demographics were a lot more different, if it was more multiracial, I think my upbringing would have been so much more different to then what it is now. There's this idea from like civic nationalists that, it doesn't matter what race you are as long as you assimilate into the culture, values, traditions, blah, blah, blah. I kind of a bit like how America, like the USA, has like a civic identity because, originally it was like a diaspora of European settlers, and you had like African slaves mixed in with like the Native Americans that are already there, and like Hispanics coming in from like Central America, and everyone sort of had to like kind of unite under this like civic identity because I guess the ethnic compartments of the nation were all over the place, so they kind of had no choice to do that in order to like collaborate and convene with each other. You cannot do that simply with the English, because what you're doing is interrupting an unbroken chain of solidified identity that's been going on for 1,000 years. And like, yes, you can say that, oh, of course ethnic groups can unite under each other, a bit like the UK, how we've got the English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, but The only reason that's possible is not only because of like genetic similarities, but obviously because of a shared history of, being with each other for 1,000 years in locational proximity. Does that mean that any person of foreign origin that's contributed to this country, I'm just gonna not recognize it? No, absolutely not. But you've got to understand that pushing this doctrine of like, we're all as English as each other no matter our background, like not only is it annoying and kind of offensive to me, but you're just clearly lying to yourself, and you know it deep down, because that's why you've got to keep pushing this rhetoric. I prefer to use the term honorary Englishman because, you've contributed into the tribe through your service, not through your inheritance. Like, the truth is, whether it hurts or not, is that 90% of this country was built by people of, Brittonic Celt and Anglo-Saxon lineage, if we're talking about English, like, specifically. And then the other 10% is overwhelmingly like Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Huguenot, Norman, Viking. The reason that I acknowledge people with no English ancestry in this way is not because I hate you, no. It's actually because I respect you. Like, I'm not going to lie to your face if I think that you're something else. Now, hear me out on this, because I think this is where I tend to differ when it becomes to like nationalist ideology and how people sort of like enter this pipeline. Throughout school, how like everybody in the class would have their own like hobby, interest or talent that they like stood out at and they were, really like known for. Like, I remember there was like a kid that like, was so good at like animal impressions. Like, there was a guy that was like, scouted for like a professional football team, like the only guy in the class that could do it. And there was like a guy that was like really good at guitar. My expertise, the thing that I was known for, was my love for geography. I was the absolute king when it came to like flags of the world, capital cities, countries, and just like knowing just like random fun facts about places around the world. Most nights before bedtime, I'd actually read a geography atlas like this, and I'd just be so fascinated about how like all these different people around the world, different places, would just do things like so differently to my culture. And as I just became more knowledgeable about more places and less ignorant, like all the kids in my class, if they had like a question about geography or they just needed to know something specific, they wouldn't even go to a teacher. They'd come to me to ask for the questions, which kind of gave me more of like a sense of belonging and, importance within the tribe in a way. Like, I think if, I was born in like the 1500s, 1600s, when we were really trying to actually explore the world, I probably would have been like a Sir Francis Drake, Sir John Barrow-esque character, just venturing off to different lands and seeing what's going on. Maybe in a colonial sense, maybe not. Even though I had like a decent idea that, different countries around the world prosper at different rates and through different means, like I still saw us all as like equal with one another under God, going back to those Christian values. And I just thought it was like, really beautiful how diverse we all were. In fact, I quite literally used to pedestalize like foreign people growing up. Like, when there was that like occasion where you would meet like a tourist or like I guess just an immigrant coming into the town or wherever I was, like I felt like a sense of nervousness. Like, I used to like, have to be of like service to them. Like, I wanted to impress them. Like, it was very, very polarizing. Like I said, I was from a very majority native area. In fact, the community was so ethnically homogenous that if you did have some sort of like foreign background, like you would actually get like attention from it, like actually like positive attention. Like, people would want to like talk to you, find out more. So being the kid that I was, when I wanted attention, there was a couple phases where I actually pretended to be like part Dutch or part Swedish. I was actually a lot blonder back then as well. So not only did that like lie, become the truth in the way, but also because I was a geography expert, I was able to like back it up and make it sound like really true. So how would I evaluate this then? Well, I'd say that, I'm a nationalist, but in the sense of that I recognize that everybody has their own place in the world where they belong, where they deserve to be, where they need to serve. And it's not, excluding people out of hate. It's just recognizing that, I think you will do better somewhere else. I think it's what's called like pan-ethno-nationalism or ethno-pluralism. I had to look it up because I was like, I'm sure I'm not the only person that thinks this way. Most cultures around the world, I would definitely indeed support the preservation of, like, obviously with context of like the actual situation. You can't obviously keep up with every ethnic conflict that's going on in the world, but also I do have my country's interests as priority. Like, I don't want my country to fall at the expense of saving others. Do you know what I mean? Now, I have like a quick memory to share of where this like really like hit home for me, like all this demographic change. So it was in like year 6, we were on this like residential trip. It's kind of like this like kids camp thing where you go to do like sports activities and like climbing walls and like all these like wooded like nature like themed activities like surviving in the wild for like a whole week. And there's all these like other schools there, like there was even like some from abroad as well, so that was like a good opportunity to like meet different people from around the world. Essentially, like one of the schools we interacted with quite a lot there was like very, very culturally different to us. Like if we like looked at like the demographics of the class, they were mostly of like South Asian and African descent with like a couple white people in them. It's like basically like if you inverted like the demographics of our class compared to them, it would literally be the exact opposite. I'm not even joking. So, you know, as the kid that obviously reads his atlas pretty much every night, I remember just being so curious, being like, you know, what country are they from? Because, you know, there's South Asians, there's Africans, there's white people as well. And I remember like, oh, do I like try and speak Arabic to them? Do I try and speak Hindi or Urdu? Like, do they even speak English? And I just remember with my limited knowledge, just like going up to one of the kids and asking like, oh, so where are you all from then? And to my surprise, they said in the most English accent ever, they said they were from Leicester. And obviously, if you know Leicester, you know, you probably guessed it before I even said it. So I was like, hang on a minute, you mean Leicester that's like 30 to 40 miles south down the road, literally like an hour drive away? And they're like, yeah, we're from Leicester. I was just so confused. I was like, why are all these like foreigners in this English school in Leicester? So I was around 10 or 11 years old when I had that interaction. And it was a few years later when I was about 14. This was when like COVID time was going on. I ended up actually emigrating across the country with my family to a different part. So I went from ethnically homogenous Lincolnshire, believe it or not, moving to like ethnically homogenous, even more homogenous Cumbria. And essentially the story goes is that, you know, I obviously lived in a different part of the country for a long time, and I was kind of like estranged from like all my old like childhood friends and that. But I came back to visit one friend that I was like really well in touch with. I came back to, you know, Witham St Hughes, the village that I was on about. And this was about, well, basically last year, 2024. So, you know, I rocked up to the, you know, the village, the red brick village that I love, you know, so dearly. And as I got off the bus, the first people that I see were, you know, some kids from like, they were like the lower year group to me. So I went to go speak to them. And like, obviously, like I said, like, you know, this place was like full of young families, but you'd be so connected to like everyone of like different ages, because like you'd have like siblings in different year groups who were like friends with them. And that's kind of like how you were connected. And it just so happened to be that these like 2 or 3 guys that I'm with just happened to be of like, one of the very few people in the village that have like a partial immigrant background. We're having a quick walk around the village, and we, you know, we just stood outside like a shop just chilling. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere on this hot summer's day, this blooming double-decker bus comes round the corner, like round the roundabout. And on that bus, like, so weirdly, the bus was full of just people of like, I guess, Indian, like, you know, South Asian, African heritage again. And it's just filled to the brim of them. Like, you know, like a double-decker bus, it's got like 150 seats, right? There's 150, like, just foreigners, I guess, people of different heritage that on that bus. And remember what I said, like the fact that this is like a dead-end village. It's like, you know, one way in, one way out. So I think what happened, it just happened to be like on a bus route between Lincoln and Newark. And to be fully honest with you, I've got nothing like technically bad to say about the situation. I'm just talking about the experience of like noticing. I'm a noticer now, like, you know, I see things and I analyze them. Because I don't really know why they were on that bus. I mean, it wasn't like there were young families like living in the village. It was all pretty much people of working age. Like, there could have been tourists for all I know. And if there were, I would have just gone out and been like, yeah, come on guys, you know, I'll show you around the place, you know, have a great time. The point I'm trying to make is, it doesn't really matter how well you try and justify their presence of being there. It doesn't really matter. Because the thing is, if you had told me like 2 years prior that I would have seeing that in the village, I just wouldn't believe you. Like, you got to understand how fast like the demographics are changing, that you would even see something like that. It's just it's just completely unheard of, okay? And that's just what's kind of crazy. I kind of remember as well, like I said, these lads were also of partial immigrant heritage themselves. So like even they noticed, like we were joking about, like they were saying like, oh, we're the majority now, you're the minority now, Thomas. I remember thinking like, it's not even just me, like everyone's noticing. So as the changes began to become more apparent to me, I ended up going down all these different pathways and pipelines, like politically. And as I said, I emigrated to Cumbria at this stage. So I was getting on for about 13, 14, and obviously we ended up in that 2-year lockdown. I had to like restart like all my friendships and like my belongingness in the meantime, because obviously it was a completely different life for me at this stage. You could say, or honestly, it could be that those small little challenges and dilemmas that I had, even in like the upbringing that was working class, that I would still call privilege personally. It was honestly like such bad timing moving there during like the COVID period. Like we had like so many problems with like the fact that we had to basically sell our house at a lower price because obviously no one was wanting to buy it. Like my dad had like redundancy problems with his job, and there was like a whole like time where we like struggled to like actually even get a house to live in like Cumbria, because obviously the values of the prices of the like the rent and the houses is a lot higher because of the Lake District being nearby. There was actually a point where we had to like temporarily live basically with our relatives because we just didn't have a house, because there was like actual construction problems on the house that we ended up living in, which definitely was a little bit of an experience for sure, especially when everywhere just looked like a ghost town, because this was all during lockdown that we were having these problems. Like I said, we never really had like an actual lavish lifestyle living in Lincolnshire. Like my parents had good jobs, yes, we were like secure in terms of like our finances, but it was just kind of like your average, normal, happy British lifestyle. Like I've always thought of myself as just in the middle of the curve. COVID was obviously a struggle for everyone, and people felt it in different ways, and everyone obviously had like a monetary struggle, and then obviously like the cost of living crisis came, and that got emphasized even more. And it just kind of meant that my parents had to like work longer hours, or on the weekends we couldn't like spend as much on like days out to like different places like we used to do when I was a lot younger. I feel really bad for my parents as well, because the whole point of moving to that part of the country was just because of obviously the beautiful landscape and the idea of them wanting to potentially retire there, because obviously they're getting to that age now, bless them. So yeah, there was also that. It just ended up becoming more of a fantasy with all these like struggles and that. However, I never really felt like the full extent of like what it's like to have to, work more hours, but everything costs more anyway. I never really felt that financial struggle. Like I was 15, 16, I was still in school, I was focused on my exams and, still focused on like video games and stuff like that, to be quite frank with you. But then obviously I ended up getting my first job at like 15. I used to do like part-time work at like an Indian restaurant actually. Like it was quite good working there. It was like my first time obviously interacting with more people from different places as well, so that was good. But anyways, yeah, so I worked at this restaurant. I was doing like bit of waitering, bit of pot washing, this and that, but it only earned me like 50 to 70 quid a week. And obviously like as a teenager that's still at school, that's like loads of money, especially when you don't spend that much. But nevertheless, like my parents, it really pained me to see them get more stressed and more unhappy as like the workload just mounted up as we were trying to basically just compete to live, like everything just felt a lot more just serious. And nowadays, as I was growing older, and it was just really sad to see. Eventually I entered college at 16, and I had to start thinking about like what career or venture I was going to do as I get to adulthood. And initially I really wanted to like be a footballer, but obviously I had loads of injuries and I wasn't really good anyway. So I kind of went down this like pathway of like self-improvement, like going to the gym, improving social skills, eating healthily and all that. And then that premise of like wanting to improve oneself sort of like escalated into like just gaining skills, knowledge, until eventually I wanted to start my own business, do a bit of like entrepreneurship. I think one of the main, like, I guess, influences that kind of inspired that was like someone like Andrew Tate, for example. I'm trying to think of like people that like of all demographics would know about, because obviously it is a very like niche like subsection of like the internet, you could say. Basically, so long story short, because of like my experience of like seeing all my friends and family struggle financially, I kind of like really got deep into this like online entrepreneurship hustle culture. I started spending like loads of like my free time just like researching and improving like on sales skills. Like I ended up like, you know, starting this like online marketing company where I'd be like cold calling, emailing, even like going face to face with like business owners, trying to like sell them like my like advertising packages and all that. Or I was even like just investing like all the money I was like earning part-time to like, you know, buy all these like courses from like, you know, these niche gurus that would like try and like sell you like, you know, oh, I guarantee you that you'll be on 10k per month by the time you're 18. If not, you know, you get a refund. Like all those like scams that was completely my fault for, you know, getting myself into, really. So yeah, it was just all shiny object syndrome at the end of the day, and I got so obsessed with it, like thinking that I'm just going to be this like self-made young entrepreneur that's going to save my family from this horrible financial situation that we were in, that I just sort of like ditched like my whole college course and kind of like wasted like 2 years of like education just for it to turn into nothing. As much as I enjoyed like the experiences and networking aspects of business, like I just literally had to quit like out after like what of like 2 years of doing it, just out of respect for myself, because it was genuinely making me unhappy and like mentally ill. I'm not even joking. Like I was a 17-year-old trying to like work out how to do all these blooming tax returns when I didn't even have any money, and like spending like, you know, just hours and hours at the library by myself, like cut off from social friendships. And like it was a hard situation to be in, but obviously it's still like my responsibility to deal with because I put myself in that situation. The reason that I've sort of like tangented off about talking about like my silly business that never ever worked out, and all these like clients that I burned and just like fell out with and had my reputation like destroyed and all that, is because it was the perfect sort of like catalyst and foundations for me to become, I guess, this massive left-wing socialist. Because I sort of started to resent myself a lot. I started to resent all those people that were richer than me, that were getting more successful, escaping the matrix in the way. And then there's this idea of like all the millionaires and billionaires hoarding all like the wealth and buying up all the assets and property, making it harder for like, you know, younger people, poorer people to get on the property ladder. And then there's this like, you know, this solution that we're gonna like, you know, tax the rich even more and redistribute all the wealth to like the poorer people, a bit like Robin Hood in a way. And that was sort of like such a great refuge to like resort all like the anger and like pain that I had, like sort of like failing in business. Like you're hearing of the likes of economists like Gary Stevenson recently. He's like a massive figurehead for this movement in the UK at the moment. I might be paraphrasing this, but I remember he was saying sometimes it's like, we need to stop telling like young people to become entrepreneurs. It's literally giving people mental illness. If it was that easy, you know, everybody would be doing it. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but he did definitely say something like that. And that is something that relates so much to me just because of my unique situation. There's this like weird dichotomy at the moment that obviously the left wing see it as, you know, the millionaires are hoarding all the wealth, and the problem is the yachts and not the small boats coming over like illegal migrants and that. And then people on the right saying, you know, it's all about immigration, like our culture and our traditions are being eradicated because of demographic changes. That's kind of how I see it at the moment, if you want to like simplify it. Obviously it's a lot more complex and nuanced than that, but that's like the best way to like dumb it down for someone that doesn't really know what's going on at the moment. Even with all that monetary struggle that I faced, I never really saw myself as like a victim in the way. I was always taught to like, you know, take responsibility for your actions. And you know, if you think about like the sort of like foundation or upbringing that I had in that homogenous society, that sort of overruled my later experiences of having financial problems. And essentially I was never really swayed to that section of, I guess, political ideology. You can always recover from financial mess, but you can never ever recover from your demographic being totally erased within the country. I think another major aspect of it as well is that originally I started my business a lot mainly because of like ego and insecurity and wanting to have like an importance to like change the world. And the fact that it kind of like teaches you to like, you know, be in an environment around like, you know, better people than you know, you don't want to be around like your family and friends all the time that are just dragging you down into like this same lifestyle. That sort of like urged me to like not be around like my normal friendship groups. It kind of like urged me to like want to dream about going like Dubai or Bali or Thailand and networking with loads of people around the world at once and just neglecting your own people. That in a way kind of made me feel more disconnected to my people and my culture. Like I wasn't, you know, going to like, you know, pubs and that as I used to. Like kind of just saw like pubs and that as like really degenerate, and like the people in there are just like low lives, and you know there's no like I guess importance about them. I can't learn from anything from, you know, 50-year-old Gary in the pub that's necking down pints all the week. And obviously it was getting to early 2024 now, and you know mass immigration was just, you know, coming to the forefront. It was peaking. This was when like the Southport stabbing happened. I remember like hearing about this for like the first time. It's like really like kind of like woke me up to what was happening. Like the grooming gang cases, that was becoming mainstream. Tommy Robinson was becoming more mainstream. Like we were hearing about all these like riots for like these illegal migrant hotels, and things just sort of like I guess just added up together, and sort of it was like a catalyst for me in a way. But hey, I lived in Cumbria at the time, right? You know, we're going to be absolutely fine. This is just all problems that happen in the city down south. Like it's never going to affect us. We can just bury our head in the sand and hope things will get better. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking at the time. It kind of got to the point where, because I've like quit this business and that, I was finding something new to try and get into in terms of like my purpose, like what I really want to do in my life. And like 24/7 I was just like, you know, overdosing in like politics and all this stuff that I'm seeing on Twitter, and like all these problems that are happening in my country. And there was this like urge to like reconnect with my culture after like disregarding it for so long, you know, wanting to be a part of my people, you know, recognizing that, you know, I am a working class, I'm a normal citizen, and I want to represent those people. Now, if you're already subscribed to my channel or you've just seen my channel before, then you'll know that this basically started out with the fact that a nationwide political event, all the like the types of politics I was getting into, was happening right on my doorstep. It wasn't happening down south or, you know, in all the cities where all the people are of different demographics and that. No, it was happening right where I was. There was that Lake District Mosque, you know, the building that basically has no reason to be where it is. It's in one of the most like important, I guess, like landscapes and areas of like quintessential Britain. There was no like Muslims in the area already, like barely any Muslims already in the area to cater to build such a mosque at the time. And obviously I don't want to get into it because I've already made so many videos on it. I'm getting quite bored of it at this point, but that was how this channel basically formed. Now, people in the local area kind of already knew that this mosque was going to be built, because I think they announced like the planning permission in like 2022 or something. But honestly, we all thought it was just going to be like, I don't know, like 2 small garages next to each other that make some sort of like prayer room. But no, for some reason, it was this massive, sleek, modern building with like 3 stories high on top of the hill, one of the biggest buildings in the town. And the population was only like, what, 0.3% Islamic? Like, it just didn't make any sense. But the paradigm shift that really like hit home for me, which I've obviously said in the videos that I've made about the mosque, is the fact that the church that my like mum and my grandma used to go like basically their whole lives, it was a Catholic church, by the way, in quite a deprived area, was basically shutting down because, I don't know, aging population, just lack of funding, and there was like other churches in the same parish that were closing as well. And like, it was just the fact that we were getting one of these and then we were losing 3 of our own. Especially when it said literally on their website that they wanted to make it a place of choice for Muslim families. I mean, to me, that just sounds like a deliberate declaration that they want to bring more Muslims into the Lake District. I mean, especially because they know for sure that they adore our beautiful countryside. That was probably the true turning point for me. I started to realize that it was not just a culture war, but it was also a spiritual war as well, starting to like manifest. And like growing up, I'd always like had like somewhat of a respect for like Christianity, because my mum's family were like very religious, like Catholic and that. And there was like other reasons as well why I was thinking of like trying to get into it, but I think it was this reason solely that kind of like made me start attending church for like the very first time. And there was like obviously all this stuff like in the media, like, you know, all these like conspiracies talking about like Freemasonry, Illuminati. Like my dad used to talk a lot about conspiracies with me when I was younger, so that was kind of like all like in my head. It was a very like low threshold for me to really get into. And there was just the fact that like obviously Christianity just seemed to be on the rise in general with young men. There was a lot of like lads at my old boxing club that actually initially like encouraged me to start going church too. So I wonder if like on a local sense they were maybe influenced by what they were seeing with like the mosque as well, because this was like kind of like big news for our area. Despite the fact that my grandma's church was closing down, with it being like obviously Catholic, Asian population, etc., there seemed to be a lot of people I knew that were going to like Anglican churches for like the first time. However, in a weird way, is there a sense of me needing to be, I guess, grateful and credit the fact that a mosque being built in my area was a bit of a wake-up call for me to start, you know, getting more like connected to, you know, my culture, my people, and Christianity as a whole. Like I've ended up going to church pretty much every Sunday for about 9 months now. Like I've started reading the Bible daily, even if it's just a few verses. I see myself being less judgmental, more empathetic, more forgiving. I've even like started to get into like praying and worshiping, even during like the good and the bad times. Like obviously I'm not perfect and I'll still always be a sinner, whatever you want to call it, but you know, I trust that I'm on the right path, so amen to that. But hang on, Thomas, why are you saying that you literally are becoming a Christian when you resonate with ethno-nationalism? That's contradictory. There we go. You know, you're being an absolute hypocrite. And to that I say, let's find out more. I mean, it's probably the pagan nationalists that are telling me that more than anybody else. I understand why people might think that, and honestly, I've even pondered to myself, you know, am I being a hypocrite for going down this path? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple Bible verses, we're going to analyze them quickly, we're going to like explain like the context behind them as well, because obviously that's actually the most important part, like actually understanding like the background of what's happening, so you can actually understand why that verse has been used. Because obviously everything's up for interpretation, and you don't want to be like those Christians and non-Christians that tend to just bastardize the Bible for their own like moral or political gain. Like the main sort of argument that people tend to go for when they're talking about like Christianity and like justifying like immigrants and refugees and to go against racism and that is probably in Leviticus 19, chapter 19, verse 33 to 34. Essentially says that when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not ill-treat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. It's important to note as well that I'm reading the New International Version and not the like the English standard like King James stuff. So when I use the word like foreigner, in there it actually uses the word sojourner, which is more to define like a foreigner that's like temporarily residing like in an area. So in like the Middle East at that time, it would have been like pilgrims or just like travelers, merchants, like people that were quite vulnerable that would go like alone or in very small groups. Now, the book of Leviticus is obviously in the Old Testament, which is before Jesus came about, and it's basically just like a collection of like rules, principles and laws that Israelites were, you know, made to live under, to like try and live in alignment with God. And this section of the book is specifically known as like the holiness code, which is basically like how someone can live under like God's holiness, how someone can like replicate it. So that's kind of like emphasized when it says like, you know, love them as yourself, you know, treat them as your native born. Obviously that emphasizes that you shouldn't exploit the privilege of being a national in the country. You should be, you know, more hospitable and like compassionate to like refugees or just foreigners that come in general. Like, as it says that, you know, for you were foreigners in Egypt, talking about basically basically like when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, as it says in the Bible, and obviously it's kind of like the core like story of like Christianity, like it gets mentioned in the Nativity as well. It reminds you of your own capacity and capability of being like in vulnerable situations or in need of rescue, for example. If you think for the most part about how this sort of relates to like immigrants in Britain, if we think about the Windrush generation that has been around since like 1948, like obviously they came in like small numbers, they like integrated very well into like different towns and cities, and because there was such a small amount of them, it never really like obviously hurt like the core identity of Britain. They were like widely accepted as British citizens, they were given equal rights, they were treated socially acceptably. Like obviously there was still like racist issues, but it was still like in the very minority. Like people never saw a justification to go against these people. So that's a positive argument for obviously immigrants and refugees in the Bible. Does it say anything negative though about it? So let's have a look. So we're looking at Deuteronomy 28:43 to 44, where it basically says that the foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. Now, again, for context, the book of Deuteronomy is basically sort of like a contract that the Israelites and God had between each other about, you know, what would happen to them as a consequence if they were unfaithful to God. As we've already established, the foreigner or the sojourner would have had like legal rights and protection at the time, but they still would have been needed to be like subservient, like they still would have been seen as a guest fundamentally. However, as a punishment to lose faith with God, it says about the foreigner rising higher and higher. Basically, you could talk about like in economic status or political power, and it'd be sort of like a humiliation to the natives of that nation, which ironically in a way has been happening for years with, you know, Jewish Zionist bankers that are, you know, obviously lending to our government to fulfill their own infiltration and agenda. Obviously we can get conspiratorial about it, but that's just the fact of the matter, isn't it, really? As it substantiates with, they'll be the head and you'll be the tail. But more visibly, we kind of see it like as citizens of, you know, the native British population. We see it with like the immigrants coming in from like, you know, Nigeria and Pakistan and India, for example, where they're basically getting overrepresented in like, you know, positions like, you know, councillors, mayors, politicians, the home office even. And obviously, you know, because they obviously have foreign ties to different countries, they're not going to have the natives' best interests at heart at the end of the day, are they? Do you reckon this is our punishment from God? Do you think this is our unfaithfulness to God? You know, the fact that, you know, we've started basically killing living beings in a woman's womb just out on a whim, or the fact that, you know, we're promoting the ideas of like, you know, sex before marriage and, you know, just sleep with as many people if you want, you know, be hedonistic, you know, drink as much as you like, take all these drugs and, you know, fry your brain so you'll end up, you know, having, you know, your hormones all over the place, which will end up going into stuff like transgenderism, homosexuality. Like, do you think that this is our punishment from what we've ended up doing as this, I guess, post-Christian secular society? This quote isn't even necessarily saying that the actual foreigner is the enemy. It's more going about that this is just a simple consequence of nature when you disobey God and you mock his word. You'll just get exploited by outsiders. So without making this video a whole blooming Bible study, I think I've got enough points across to summarize what I really want to try and, you know, tell you about my position on like Christianity and ethno-nationalism. I would basically just say that, you know, be kind to people from other nations, treat people equally, but you know, don't let people take the mick. Don't let people exploit your hospitality. Don't allow the Saxon to need to go and hate, you know. Speaking of Saxons, actually, another thing that got me onto this political pipeline in a way was genealogy, like, you know, ancestral research, family research, you know, finding out your roots, family tree, whatever you want to call it. Because obviously I already had like a big interest in geography, like kind of like as like a sub-interest, I was always into history too. So this kind of like came naturally for me. It's not really like a sort of hobby that young people do. It's more like for people that are middle-aged or a lot older. Like my mum was initially like very interested in it. She did it for like, you know, quite a long time. Like she used to like go to like library archives and like visit like graveyards and like get all these like photographs and try and find them. It was a little bit silly in a way, but it got to about like lockdown 2020, you know, when we were all stuck inside with nothing to do and like people were like trying out different things. That was when I like first, I guess, got into it and started to research my dad's side, which I didn't really know a lot about. I think my favorite thing about the hobby is that it's not just learning about just, you know, average, you know, world history. Like this is personal history. Like this is learning about where you fit into this, you know, long history of like this complicated world. And like it really did like strengthen my connection to not just like my own kin and culture, but like to the actual land that I was living on. Like it felt like learning about where all my ancestors live and what they did. It kind of made me felt more connected, even more specifically to certain areas of the country. Like we all know subconsciously that we come from a long line of millions and millions of ancestors, but most of us probably couldn't even recite the names of our great grandparents off by heart. Reading the stories and the struggles of my ancestors, seeing like physical memorabilia that represented them, you know, seeing all the old photographs of what they would have looked like, it kind of like spiritually awoken me like to realize that, you know, I'm not just a singular being. Like I'm a mix and construction of all these different legacies of people from, you know, I guess of my own culture. Like I am a community within myself. And I know some people, they're very like unappreciative of like, I guess, you know, where they come from, all the ancestors. They always believe that, oh, you know, your nature doesn't matter. It's all about like your upbringing, the culture, the people you're around. It doesn't matter where you're actually from originally. And to that, I'd say that, yeah, you know, fair enough. Like I believe too that your upbringing has a massive impact of like your personality and how you are as a person. But let's be honest, like the nature versus nurture debate, it's been very balanced for hundreds of years. I'd say like it's a 50-50. Some people that have had like quite a sustainable childhood, even like myself, don't really realize the psychological trauma that people go through when they're disconnected from monotropy, or they, you know, suffer from fatherlessness. The relationship you have with your parents and your siblings and, you know, by extension your wider family, you know, play like a massive role. They're like the sort of like the template, the foundations of the sort of like relationships you're going to have with friends and colleagues and, you know, other people as you grow up. If you don't believe me, just go and watch Long Lost Families on ITV. It's one of my mum's favourite TV shows because the whole premise is basically like reconnecting foundlings, adoptees, you know, people that have gone through like the orphanage system and reconnecting them with like family they haven't seen in like decades or even at all. And they even say like on the show that this person has grown up in like a loving adoptive family. But regardless, they still have that longing, they still have that, you know, need to have a connection to their ancestry, their blood family, which in a way kind of just disproves this idea that, oh, you know, it's all based on how you grow up. You know, nature isn't a cause for anything. And I'd use this fact to advocate more for ethno-nationalism. And in a way, I actually feel bad for second, third generation migrants that are living in a country which its culture is completely contrasting to their, I guess, birth origins. And that can lead to, you know, challenges with integration, the feeling of like identity crisis. So anyways, what are my like genealogy ancestral results then? Because, you know, the benefit of living in Britain is that we are extremely well documented with like parish records, censuses, like birth certificates, stuff like that. They go back like 500 years, if not 700 years in some cases, which is honestly really crazy. So I've managed to verify all 64 of my great grandparents. Yes, I do have 64 great grandparents. I'm not inbred, even with this face. And then on the whole, I've gone back like on loads of different lines that I'm able to do. So it's like 1300s to 1700s because there was like a few after like the fourth great grandparent that I couldn't go, but on some lines I could get back to like 13th, 14th, 15th great grandparent, which is honestly insane. Like my dad's side was like the easiest to do because he's like completely English across the board, and honestly it was like so English that I thought he could like break a Guinness World Record for it, for how like consistent it was going back generations. My mum's side is a lot more diverse. My mum's essentially half English and she's got like half Irish as well, but she also did a DNA test as well, and she got like a load of Scottish in it, so I want to say like half English, and then like the rest is all like Scottish and Irish, I guess. There's like a sort of bit of like spice to it. So I believe 4 of my 16 great grandparents were born in Ireland and emigrated over to England during like the potato famine and the Industrial Revolution, when Ireland was like still fully part of the UK. I think it was more like Northern Ireland, I guess. So that's probably where the Scottish comes in, but there's a bit in obviously Southern Ireland as well, Republic of Ireland, you know. I'll call it how it is. I think it's important to establish that I'm only technically 3/4 English, because even though that I guess like ancestry is like the primary defining force behind like ethno-nationalism, like no one's really asking you to be pure-blooded. Like I think that's a bit ridiculous, like obsessing and fixating over the numbers. Like you should be proud of wherever you're from. If you do happen to be mixed heritage, like you shouldn't want to like shun any side of your identity and, you know, only look for one side. And I think for me, because I've obviously grown up in England and the majority of my ancestry is English, like I do tend to like resonate more with my English ancestors than I do with my Irish and potentially my Scottish ones. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of people these days that are mixed heritage and mixed race, almost increasingly so. And we can talk about Kalergi Plan and Great Replacement all until the cows come home, but the fact is we are an interconnected world. As we, you know, get into the modern age with technology, we can go around the world a lot easier than we could, you know, back in the 1700s, for example. So it is a really important discussion to have. It's like, you know, do we really want to have a nation where we're all this like mixing, melting pot, as they call it? I mean, I don't blame a lot of people for getting into like interracial marriages and all that. I mean, I see the appeal in it. I don't know about you, but like the thing is, like you see all these like Donnies on social media like talking about like never mix, like as a dog whistle they repeat in like comment sections on posts and that. And like I just kind of think like it's a little bit cringe. It's just a little bit cringe. Like I get what you're saying, I kind of support it in a way, but it's a little bit cringe. Like I swear down, if like a random girl from the Philippines just gave you like the slightest bit of attention, you'd change your stance so quickly. Regardless though, it does need to be curbed, like, but I think that will like just fix itself as you become like a more patriotic and nationalist like country. Like according to the 2021 census, only 3% of the population were mixed race, and I think it was saying, like I saw like another statistic was saying like 10% of all couples are like interracial. And honestly, I thought it was like a lot more, to be honest, especially because I think like 50% of like all like family themed advertisements that I see happen to be a mixed race couple. And yeah, it really like emphasizes the agenda that they've got going on, doesn't it? Personally, I think it's like really immoral, irrational, and if anything like impossible to even consider like remigrating or deporting like someone who's like mixed race, so like half British or half like something else. Like I've heard like a lot of ethno-nationalists saying stuff like that at the moment, and like quite frankly, you can't deny they do have an ancestral and psychological connection to the land. Even if you think, oh, they've got dual loyalties, like still, like, you know, would you really say the same about someone that's half English, half Polish? I mean, there's plenty of them, right? So like I said, like people start to bring up stuff like, oh, IQ differences and like, or like other racial differences of why they can't be here. But honestly, if they're only 3% of the population, like what's the problem? And like you're not going to bring people into the movement as such, because, you know, even in the most ethnically homogenous societies in Britain nowadays, you know, everyone's got a mixed race friend. They don't want to see him go, do they? And honestly, I think dual loyalties is only really a problem if you're like a fifth generation migrant, but all your ancestry is still like Pakistani, for example. Like for me, with like my Irish ancestry, like, you know, you got to remember this is like 4 to 5 generations of like integrating into English families before I was created. And, you know, my mum likes to go on about her Irish ancestry, but she's only been there a few times. Like my grandparents, they were both half Irish as well in respect. And I think my grandma's never ever been to Ireland. Probably the same with my granddad. Like they were born in like the Lancashire area. So yeah, like I don't even like Guinness. I've only been to Ireland once myself on holiday when I was like 6. Like I don't speak Irish. I don't think, well, most Irish don't speak Irish anyway. And to be fair, even with our rigid history of the Brits, I guess, devouring the Irish for 800 years, like, or that is like a type of history I would like to learn more about, obviously. But you can't deny we are a very compatible ethnic group, even then still. Like, obviously, there's the genetic link with like the Celtic origins, with like the Britons, obviously, in Britain, and then the Gaels in Ireland. And yeah, to be fair, I don't really see the Irish as immigrants in respect, because obviously they are still technically part of the UK, and you know, I do see these Isles as being sort of, I guess, one federation. Like I see the English, the Welsh, Scottish, and Irish as my genetic brothers from like the same family household, you could say. I think another important point is that I don't really claim to be Irish at all. Like I'm an Englishman at heart. Like I don't know about you, but there's this weird dynamic of like Irish identity and English identity where there's so many more people that like even if they've got like a drop of Irish in them, even less than me, they're like so eager to claim that they're Irish and, oh, I've got Irish ancestry. Have you ever noticed that? Isn't it a bit weird? Like there's enough saddos out there trying to be Irish. Like we don't need another person, you know, raising the Irish flag, saying up the rah or whatever. You know what I mean? Regardless, though, I still would like to visit Ireland maybe at some point, and maybe like go to the places where my Irish ancestors lived. Although to be fair, like Irish ancestry and like genealogical research is actually quite difficult, because there was a fire at like the archive centre in, I believe, like the 1920s, which actually destroyed a lot of records. So, you know, you can only get back to like the early 1700s in some cases, which is a little bit upsetting, but you know, it's enough to find out, right? So yeah, when it comes to like my political interests, I'll always be England first, and then Scotland, Wales, and Ireland by extension, and then the rest of Europe. That's how I'd probably put it in like a hierarchy. But even then, like I still have this like pan-ethno-nationalist, ethno-pluralism sort of mindset, like I was talking about before, where, you know, I do believe that, you know, the majority of ethnic groups around the world do deserve to have their own homestead, to have their own country where they can live in peace, you know, free from war, free from international intervention. The experiment of multiculturalism is dead, and monoculturalism and monoracialism is king. And, you know, quite frankly, I think the way I see multiculturalism these days is that everybody thinks they're the minority. Everybody thinks they're being wronged to. You know, it'd be great if I had the blooming superpowers to stop Israelis killing Palestinians. I wish I could have the power to stop the displacement of Christians in Nigeria, the Sudan war, the Ukraine war. But it's kind of just human nature. It's kind of inevitable, isn't it? I mean, like, isn't just every war that's ever happened in history just, you know, different ethnic groups just fighting over land? It's just all it is, isn't it? But that doesn't mean I can still pray for it. It doesn't mean that, you know, I can stand up for it when it's happening against my people. And on that topic, let's discuss imperialism, or more specifically the British Empire, as it relates directly to the reason why we're all in this mess with like mass migration and all of that. If you're an ordinary British school child like myself, you'll know that in our school curriculum, we basically never ever touch on the subject of British Empire. Like in our history lessons, it's never the main topic at all. Like you might touch on it a little bit if you're talking about like the causes of World War One and World War Two, and if you talk about like maybe Queen Victoria and that. But we never ever, as a kid, learned about British Empire. Like, I guess you could, if you were to ask like a random British school kid to like tell you like information about World War Two, and then one to talk about like the British Empire, like they'd probably be able to talk about World War Two 10 times more than they could the British Empire. Now, because of this, I kind of just have a more neutral perspective on the British Empire. Like, I kind of just see it for what it is. Like at the end of the day, like we've got the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Mongol Empire. You know, it's kind of interesting to see how they like started to prosper and they conquered all these different lands and built these cities and had all these lavish treasures. And you know, they started, you know, fighting off other tribes and, you know, killing, raiding, enslaving people, and then eventually they hit their peak and they just fell. Like I said, it's just a cycle of human nature. It's been happening all around history, even in like, you know, small little islands across the globe. There's like different tribes going against each other on, I guess, a micro scale. So, you know, if the British didn't colonize a quarter of the world, you know, someone else would have gone and done it instead. Do you know, do you know what I mean? So I guess the positive side of like not learning about the empire is maybe the fact that, you know, because of my geography obsession, if I knew that, you know, Britain had, you know, done all these colonizing around the world, which I kind of did have like an inkling of like as a young child, but it was never really a sort of topic I went into. Like I probably would have had like more of a superiority complex, you know, regarding my British identity. Like, oh, you know, we killed and conquered all these tribes, we're the best. The negative side of it is the fact that we're brought up completely ignorant and deprived of, you know, knowing about the most needle moving controversies that are used to, I guess, justify the most needle moving struggles that we're facing at the moment as a nation. Mass immigration, is it not? Is that coincidence? Probably, maybe not. It's just a thought. I know for sure from my ancestral research that I have no direct ancestors that would have been, you know, actually contributing to the British Empire. They all basically stayed in the British Isles and they didn't go any further than that. But still, I am part of the English/British people, so my kin would have partaken in the campaigns that they launched. So I could celebrate the fact that, you know, we brought a lot of peace and unity to like internal tribal conflicts happening on the different lands that we colonise. I can celebrate the fact that we built loads of hospitals and schools and railroads and loads of different infrastructure to like help out the country. You know, I can celebrate the fact that we actually enriched their national resources by obviously creating international trade routes that made the countries richer. But then it would be hypocritical for me to bury my head in the sand when the Bengal famine or the Mau Mau uprising gets mentioned, and you know, some people like to, you know, try and like, you know, scapegoat the Jews and say, oh, the Jews were infiltrating the British government and, you know, the Brits would never do that. Maybe not, but you know, it's still a little bit of a, you know, a cop out if you ask me. Even if the British Empire was like the worst thing that ever happened to the world, like I still wouldn't be any more or less patriotic. Like I have literally no obligation to appease anyone or give any you know, what they call blooming reparations or all that malarkey. Like my direct ancestors would have been working the fields or the factories when this was happening. Because there's something really sinister how this whole British Empire excuse is framed. Like on the one hand, we're told that multiculturalism is so beautiful and colourful and it's great to have such a diverse society mixing with loads of people from around the world. And if you just criticise it, even just marginally, then you're suddenly told that no, actually you specifically, you went to Africa and India, you marched in and exploited all the resources and enslaved all the people. So actually you've had it coming, you know, you deserve this revenge. And obviously not every British colony has a negative view on the empire. Like I've connected with people from like Sri Lanka and Singapore, and they've actually had quite a more positive view on it than people from Pakistan, for example. I decided to do a little bit of a case study and sort of like look into like one British colony where I can kind of like go deep into what I like personally think about it. So I chose Ghana, which was known as the Gold Coast colony at the time. So when the British came in around the 19th century, I believe, the sort of like main civilization that was there at the time was called like the Ashanti Empire, which was like what's called today like the ethnic people of like Akan, which is like one of the main tribes of Ghana. Because of the technological power that we had over them at the time, we basically became their protectorate. So we started building like obviously hospitals, schools, railroads, and then we were exporting resources like cocoa, gold, and slaves. However, you had the northern tribes, which I think were known as like Mole Dagomba. I think I'm pronouncing that right. They were significantly underdeveloped compared to like central and south Ghana because of the sort of like landscape up there wasn't really good for building on and extracting resources, and it was further away from the coast, which would obviously make it more difficult for like trade routes and stuff. And then like in the southeast you had the tribe known as the Yu, and unfortunately they were split amongst French colonial territory and English or British colonial territory, with French Togoland and Ghana. So you had like a large grievance within just one ethnic group, as they were literally split in half, quite literally, as two colonial powers arbitrarily just partitioned their colonies like it was nothing. They didn't really take into consideration the actual people living there, which obviously caused more wars, more conflicts, more falling outs in the sort of like the governance. If you're from Ghana, let me know your opinion on the British Empire, because I'd be really interested to know. But in my opinion, from how I see it, like, yes, it was exploitative, yes, there was a lot of hardship, but at the end of the day, it seems like it was a happy ending. There was unity amongst the tribes in that area that united under that Ghana in identity. And it's kind of just similar to how like the UK is formed, like uniting with English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish. And yes, hopefully the Yu tribe will be able to unite one day under one little country, ethnic group, whatever, as they're split between Ghana and Togo at the moment. Yes, us Brits are really bad at drawing borders. I mean, look what we did, drawing the borders of Israel and all the mess that's got us into. So yeah, I kind of get it. I really wonder if the British Empire is a good justification of why we're seeing, mass migration into Britain at the moment, because, there's Ireland and Sweden, which are arguably getting it worse, and they've been on like the full brunt throughout history. They haven't been going around colonizing people, but I guess there's always going to be an excuse, like, oh, the Irish diaspora, they've gone all around the world and immigrated to Australia and to America, so actually, they can't complain about immigrants because they're immigrants too everywhere. Or the fact that Sweden had a colony in Ghana between 1650 and 1663, so now they have to accept unlimited migration or something. The excuses are endless. They're pulling them out the backside basically. There's this blooming narrative as well that the English aren't actually native because the Anglo-Saxons came 1500 years ago, and quite frankly I'm not even going to respond to those stupid dumb claims because it's just a waste of time. And funnily enough, like really ironically, I see this like Native American social media account on like Instagram and TikTok sometimes, where they basically talk about how they were wrong during colonialism and they got, taken away from their land, and, all these like beautiful Native American, like, cultural traditions that were destroyed at the hands of European settlers. And in a way, funnily enough, like I kind of relate to like his like struggles of being indigenous, but like in an English context. Like I know there was like what's it called, like International Indigenous Day, I believe, like a month ago, in which I'm recording this, and like it was so weird because like people were like obviously talking about like Aboriginals, Amazonian tribes, Native American tribes, but there was never this thing about what about Happy Indigenous Day for us Europeans. I mean, no one else is indigenous to Europe other than us. But yeah, obviously it doesn't apply to us because we're white, most likely. Okay, we're getting to the end now. So obviously let's get into tourism, the very last topic. So as I've already established, as a child, I was always into my geography. So I always knew I was going to do something with it, basically where I'd be, meeting people from around the world and showing them the true beauty of English British culture. Which is why today I've ended up at university studying, believe it or not, tourism business. Who would have thought I'd be going uni? Like I've always been skeptical of like the debts I've been getting into, but there's many reasons why I wanted to go uni. I mean, one, I kind of just wanted to take the leap because I was on a gap year working at a hotel in the Lake District, and I just really wanted something new. I wanted to get to the big city. I wanted to get some new experiences. And two, full honesty, I really wanted to see what all this multiculturalism malarkey is all about, because it's all well and good looking at social media and seeing what's going on in the big cities and that, where most of the events are happening. But you need to see it with your own eyes. You need to get empirical knowledge. You need to be a minority in your neighborhood for the first time. I mean, I've been at university for a month now, and this is like a really, really new experience where I'm around so many different people at once, and I've got so many like different opportunities to like network and have discourse with different people with loads of different ranges of beliefs, more than I ever did beforehand living at home. So far, it's been pretty typical for like an average city in the UK. Like I've seen street fights, like homelessness, the odd peer person getting arrested. Although the nearest Tesco to where I'm living at has got like one of those like see-through barriers, and there's like a security guard just promptly stood by the door. And literally, it's like one of those little supermarkets you get like on the corner of the street. Like it's something I've never ever seen before. I may be a minority in my neighborhood for like the very first time in my life, but the effects of what you could call multiculturalism are very minimal, because obviously it's not like you're being raised from a baby in that environment. Like obviously you're in early adulthood, you've got like the chance to like meet, trade and network with different people from different cultures. So yeah, like it's pretty wholesome if you ask me. And also because most of the, I guess, foreigners that I'm interacting with are actually foreigners. They're not people born in this country. They're international students on temporary visas that will probably be here for like a couple years and just go back home. Like I've met like Polish, Sri Lankan, even like Korean, like Chinese people. And you'll be surprised, like in a way they are actually the ones that like on the same wavelength as me, for example, in terms of like ethno-nationalism. They all understand that we have our own role and area of place to play in this world. It's that sort of networking with international students that I really want to like venture into. Like with my course being like to do with tourism business, I am pretty much interested in like the specific niche of how tourism affects immigration and vice versa. So I think that's possibly the sort of route I could go down if I really want to like stand out, I guess, in this nationalist movement. Of course I know like remigration and all that is meant to be like the most needle moving aspect to advocate for, but I still want to see what other different ways there is to go about this. Because honestly, right, I truly believe that if English people become a minority, ethnic minority in England, then England will just cease to exist. It's simple as that. Like I can't expect someone of Pakistani lineage to come to England and absolutely uphold the English culture of my ancestors, like, because that just goes against your natural tendencies. You think it would be like that for me? You think if I went to Pakistan I would have absolute loyalty to Pakistan and not England? I want to show not just natives of this country but foreigners as well how beautiful our history and our culture really is, and why it needs to be maintained by us. And foreigners will always have a different perspective to England compared to me, and vice versa. Let me give you an example, right? So do you remember the Notre Dame fire back in like 2019? Where like I don't know how it started, but there was a lot of damage to the building. It didn't get completely destroyed, but let's just pretend it did, right? If the Notre Dame, probably one of the most famous buildings in France, basically ceased to exist, I still would have gone about my day quite normally. Like I might have empathized and said like, oh, that's really bad to see, like I feel for the French people, but I still would have gone about the task that I had to do that day. Now, if say something similar happened to Lincoln Cathedral, for example, one of the most monumental and important buildings, I guess, within my hometown, within my life, I think, honestly, like, I don't know if this is just me, maybe I'm just being really silly, but I think I would have shedded a few tears, I would have been like proper upset about it, because that's my history, that's my heritage. And as much as I have a sort of like global respect for like the Great Wall of China or Angkor Wat in Cambodia, like I don't think I would have had the same reaction. I'm sorry, I wouldn't. And I don't expect a migrant from a country the opposite side of the world to have the same reaction to me, because he has no connection to this land. So yeah, to all the friends that I have out there that do happen to have an immigrant background, I love you. Please don't take this personally. The whole reason that I'm trying to put a positive spin on things is because I know that things are going to get even worse as time goes on, as cultural enclaves within this country keep clashing and clashing with each other. You gotta understand that when I meet you on an individual basis, I don't judge you, I don't blame you, all my politics just goes out the window. But when stuff starts to hit the fan, it will become very apparent to us that, we do want to, proceed to our families and our kin by extension. It's our natural human tendency. The beauty of meeting someone from a different country is that I get to learn about the mysteries of your different traditions and lifestyle. But if I'm constantly living amongst you, that polarization is going to get degraded, it's going to get dismissed, and I'll probably just end up resenting you in a way, because we're not fulfilling the purpose of the friendship that we were set out to have in the first place. When I meet someone from another country, I expect the exchange to be balanced in the array of ideas that we're sharing with one another. If you go on and live in my country for the whole time and you know about my way of life unequivocally, I'm going to feel deprived in the friendship. How am I expected to, know just as much about your way of life if you're only ever in my country and I'm not going back and forth with each other to yours? How on earth am I going to be able to trust that friendship? How am I truly going to know about you and your culture? A homogenous, ethnically white Britain is the best representation to show the foreign tourist the best idea of our great nation, because it was truly built by those people, and anybody else that contributed, at most, they can get an honourable mention, like I mentioned previously. There's this idea that people just need to integrate into the society and our values and everything will be okay. I actually rather that they didn't. I'd rather that they'd occupy their own uniqueness in their homeland peacefully and prosper in their own unique way. But unfortunately, like I said before about paradigms, it's going to be very difficult to explain that to someone who, is of a foreign heritage, that's born in this land and that's lived in this land all their life. And quite frankly, I see that as a problem.